Ever wonder what it's like to be an athlete on the world's biggest stage? And what really goes on inside the village? Let's find out.
Legends with Bevo. The road to Tokyo. Thanks to Anytime Fitness Glenelg. Renelec Electrical Services.
Welcome to Legends with Bevo, the road to Tokyo, Facebook Live for the very first time. And what a pleasure it is to be joined by Adelaide's own Rachel Bugg, 2012 Olympic diver. Buggy, great to have you on for a chat.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, talk about your childhood memories growing up with the Olympics and who perhaps your childhood hero was.
Well, I think growing up, I was very sports orientated, but not so much Olympic orientated. I didn't really watch much television, didn't really understand what it was, and I just did my own thing. But it wasn't until I actually started diving that I really started looking up to people and having idols of sport. And so naturally they were divers. It was Ludi Talkie, now Wiggins, and Matt Helm. They were probably the two people I really looked up to when I was younger. And I wanted to be able to dive like them. I think they're both very beautiful and graceful divers. And so it's really, it was really awesome to have that from a young age and then grow up to kind of be Ludi's synchro partner and still nowadays friends with Matt Helm. So it's great.
And qualifying for your very first Olympics, 2012, I mentioned that was the London Olympics. Talk to us through, qualifying for it, how it went, and that sort of feeling when you found out you were going to be at your very first Olympics.
So back in 2012, it wasn't like one competition kind of you're in and you're going. So it was a little bit of a process, which is like good and bad, I guess. I look back and I'm so appreciative of it. But we had trials in Adelaide, like Olympic trials then. And from there, once you got a spot, you actually had to go overseas and qualify and get a score. And so once I was in Adelaide and I was diving I'd missed out individually. And I was diving with Ludi Wiggins, synchro. She'd been my synchro partner. We've been training lots together back and forth from Melbourne and Brisbane. I was living in Queensland at the time. And so we dived and we came first in Adelaide, which was amazing. Bit of a surprise. We had Alex Croak and Mel Wu, who were probably strong competitors to be winning. But fortunately, we did a really good competition that day and we won. And from there, it was going to Canada and America. We had two competitions, two opportunities to make our score overseas. I'll never probably forget this moment because it was in Canada, it was live streamed to their country. And as soon as you get out the pool, the cameras are on you and you have to stand and rewatch your dive on a screen and the scores come up. And I remember after the first dive, I was like, oh, Ludi, I didn't do a very good job. And she was like, oh, and I was like, it's all good. We've got this. And it was kind of like just one dive at a time and moving forward. And after our last dive, I was like, oh my gosh, obviously hoping we'd make the score. And we needed a score of 315 and up on the screen came 316. And I just remember this sense of relief, but also bring it on. Relief I'd made the team, but that's not my job done. So yeah, it was an awesome feeling, straight on the phone to Mum and yeah, it was great.
I was about to ask you who the first person that you called her, so Mum, and what was her feeling when you told her that amazing news?
They were, ecstatic. Mum's, been my alarm clock while I was growing up. She woke me up and took me training and obviously, it was hard work. It always is on the athlete, but the family, I couldn't have done it without my family. That was my support network. And so Mum and Dad waking me up and driving me training and stuff, I think it was probably an accomplishment for them as well, that I'd made the team.
Well, Rach, one thing that amazes me is divers because I must admit I've jumped off the 3-metre board and I think I ended up doing a belly flop once and I can't even do any flips or anything to save myself. So the fact that you guys do flips off the 10-metre board is unbelievable. So tell us, how you first got into your diving and did you come from a gymnastics background before diving or, explain a bit more your sort of journey so far.
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of divers actually do come from a gymnastics background, me included. So I'd finished gymnastics. I was really not enjoying it. I was coming home from training crying a lot and Mum said, if you're not happy, then you need to finish. And I was 11 years old, she made me call up the gym and let them know that I was having a break. I'm still on that break. I think to kind of put accountability on myself for that decision. And then I'd met a girl at another family friend's going away party. They were moving to Perth and this mum was like, oh, Laura dives, you should start diving. And I was like, okay, didn't really, give it a thought. And Mum questioned me and said, is it something you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. So naturally mum pays for the term for me to go diving, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. Didn't want to do it. Not really sure why, just didn't like it. But mum was like, I've paid for your term. Can you finish your term? And I think obviously towards the end of the term, I didn't complain too much because I just kept going and didn't stop. And yeah, you actually start on poolside and like the 1 meter springboard, and then through your career, you just gradually move up to the 10 meters. So it's not on day one you jump up there. To be honest, I've been retired 7 years and I still think I'm not quite sure how I did it now. So, but yeah, I loved it. I still do love diving. It's always going to be in my blood. So.
Did the adrenaline sort of come in when you first got to that 10 meter platform and thought, oh my goodness, I'm so high? Because I get scared of heights at the 3 meter, let alone the 10 meter.
I'm still scared of heights, to be honest. And if I physically just like feet first jump off, I don't like it at all. I hate that feeling of my stomach going. But when you're like diving and rotating and twisting, you don't get the same feeling. So obviously there's, more chance of error when you're actually doing twists and turns, but you don't get that same, stomach dropping feeling, which is, I guess, what I don't like about it. But still from a height, it's scary. But like I said, you do all your preparation in the build up. You're not just thrown up there one day and say, throw this and see how it goes. So I think when your coach trusts that you're going to be okay to go up there, then you trust yourself. And yeah, it's not always great. It doesn't always go to plan, but that's what we do as athletes. We learn and trial and error and move forward.
And you spoke about qualifying for London. Tell us about the training leading up to the London Olympics after you qualified, the lead up going towards London, and then what happened there and what that sort of feeling was like.
I was living in Queensland at the time, so I wasn't with my family in South Australia, but I don't think much really changed in between the trials and the games, except for I was now on the team officially. And so it was still repetition, training with Ludi. I was flying to Melbourne a lot. I think that was really taxing on me mentally and physically, to be honest, probably more than I realised at the time. Ludi lived in Melbourne. She had a 1-year-old baby. It was a lot easier for me to travel down there than it was for her to travel up to Brisbane. She did travel up to Queensland to train with me. It was important we, both went both ways. But I think more often than not, like I went down to Melbourne to train with Ludi. So my day sometimes would entail waking up at 5 o'clock, training from 6 a.m. to 7:45 a.m., straight from training with my coach, Hui Tong, to the airport, straight on a plane, off a plane, 10-meter session with Ludi, back on a plane, back to Brisbane. Sometimes we would just do one training session. Sometimes we'd stay overnight. It was very, a really whirlwind, I think. And I think you kind of push that aside sometimes after you've made the games. And after I retired after London and went back for Com Games and stuff, you kind of forget what happened. But when I, really think about it, it was, a big task, I think. I mean, I wouldn't have changed it. We needed to train together and we're in different states, but big ask.
Wowzers, that's I'm staggered by how much you did there. So it just makes you appreciate the effort that you girls put in, girls and guys for that matter, that make it to the Olympics. That's amazing, and thanks for sharing that insight. And also the Olympics themselves, London. Tell us about the actual overall experience with the opening ceremony and being involved in that.
So I didn't go to opening ceremony. None of the divers actually attended that year. Diving's one of the first sports to be competing at the Olympics usually. Not actually sure how it's running this year, but it was in 2012 and I was day 4. So if you attend opening ceremony, you don't actually get out of there till about 3 a.m. So if you think about all that hard training we've done and all this preparation and really being disciplined with, sleep, eating, like your routine, your recovery, that's quite detrimental to be then, stay awake till 3 a.m. I think maybe potentially if we were at the end of the Olympics, like the 2-week competition, it'd be different. But because we were up so close, I think it just wasn't even an option. I believe it was chosen for us by our manager that no divers were attending, but if I had been given the individual decision, I would have chose not to go. So I was also injured. I was looking after a neck injury in the lead up to London. I had my neck taped throughout my competition. But I I was really nursing that, and being on my feet or sitting in not the correct position for hours on end waiting for a march out for opening ceremony was just not an option for me.
Is that disappointing though, the fact you weren't involved?
Oh, absolutely. If you could have the best of both worlds, it'd be unreal. But you're there to do a job. You're there to compete. And if I was there to, if I'd marched opening ceremony, I could potentially have not competed at the games. Like I could have injured myself more. I could have really put myself out. I wouldn't have been in my peak physical condition because of my sleep and nutrition. So, it's easy to say you'd probably be disappointed, but I was there to compete and I got to do that. So I definitely can't be sad about it.
And Rach, I've heard some very interesting stories about inside the village, from 9 Maccas at Atlanta to water bomb fights and that sort of thing. What was your experience like with the Olympic Village?
Pretty subtle, I think, compared to what I hear happens at the village. I was like, what village was I in? So not much really happened for me. It was a lot of walks to the food hall. I think that was my favorite place, eating. But a lot of the time we were just at the pool, or I was in my room, just resting, getting ready for next training. It was all, pretty on the down low. After I finished competing, I had a week and a half. I think this is where the whirlwind comes in, and I forget a lot about what happens at the Olympics, because my mum told me that she had breast cancer and she was supposed to be in London for 16 days and she was there for 5. She watched me compete and flew straight home to have surgery. I turned into a mess, naturally. I didn't know what was going to happen to my mum, if she was going to live, if she was going to die. I didn't know the severity. It was just I'd been on the high of my life and I'd come down to earth real quick. So I went out to dinner with lots of friends that had finished competing and their families that were over there, and everyone kind of took me under their wing, and that was really good for me, I think, as a distraction. I said to Mum, I'll come straight home, and she said, you can't do anything, nothing's going to happen to me quickly. I just need to go get surgery. And so I stayed over there and, got to support my teammates, which was pretty important. And I feel very, honoured that I got to be there and watch my mates, technically, they're teammates, but they're also friends. I got to watch them compete, so that was pretty cool.
That's wonderful. And Rach, obviously we've seen the last 12 months, it's been a horrendous situation for everyone around the world with the COVID and the postponing of the Olympics. How would have you dealt with it personally as an athlete, knowing that the Olympics are going to be postponed for another 12 months?
I think the athletes that are going to Tokyo are phenomenal. I think their strength and their mental strength is unreal. I don't think I would have coped very well. I don't even know if I would have stayed the extra year. It's hard to know, and very dependent, I guess, on where you are in your career. If it's, early stages and it's going to be, first Olympics, or if it's, your 3rd or 4th Olympics you're going for. But I live with one of the the divers at the moment, and I was just honestly so proud of how she came into the trials last week for diving. She is the most headstrong person I've met, and she has been so strong and willpowered through this whole COVID, extra year of training. And I don't know if I could have done it. A year does go past really quick when we're just talking about life, and they probably look now, hindsight, it's probably gone quick. But the stuff they had to do, training at home, that's just extra discipline, is just unreal. And I praise all the athletes that are going to Tokyo. So,
well, we should mention that particular athlete, your friend, Annabelle Smith. She's a lovely girl. I interviewed her last year, and what an amazing privilege it would have been, because you were involved with the commentary last week up at the Sydney Trials for diving, and so you actually saw Annabelle qualify for the Olympics. Tell us about that particular moment.
Very exciting. Once again, it's not quite like swimming. When you touch the wall first, you're guaranteed a spot. There is a selection process, so they had to go through first and second pretty much, it gives you a very good, there was no reason for her to not go through, but still it's just not a guarantee as soon as they are ranked first and second. But being over there and being able to be there for her was unreal. Unfortunately, her mum couldn't go over and watch her compete because she's in Victoria, living in Melbourne. Her dad had happened to be staying in Queensland, and when the lockdown happened, he stayed up there so he could come to Sydney and watch her. But she's like my family as well. So to be able to be there for her and watch her qualify for her 3rd Olympic Games and her first individual was just unreal.
And your first ever commentary experience as well with 7 Plus. Talk to us through that and how you enjoyed that experience.
That was really awesome. So a diver who is, or a former diver who is now the manager, the comms manager and media manager for Diving Australia, asked if it was something I'd be interested in. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, didn't really quite know what I was getting myself into. Never done any commentary before. Was going to be doing it with another former diver who has done lots of commentary, and I thought that's going to be good. We can bounce, I can bounce off him. He's really experienced. But unfortunately, he lives in Victoria and they were in lockdown. So it was actually me and Matthew Barnard, who is the manager of the media and communications for Diving Australia. And I think going in, I also did it with Georgia Shee, and she was on pool deck for us. So Matt and I did the diving of the competitions, and Georgia did the post-comp interviews on pool deck. So there was a little team of our 3. None of us had ever worked together in, that kind of setting. We've all dived together. All of us, I think, went in there relatively nervous. I sure was, because I love my sport, and, there's been amazing commentators I always hear, and, I kind of wanted to do our sport proud and do the best I could. And I felt very honoured that I was asked, and I enjoyed every minute of it, and, would love to do it again one day. And, it was a great 2 days. Got to watch all my mates compete and got to commentate and be part of that great atmosphere.
Well, fingers crossed, I'm sure you will get another opportunity because you're a gun, Rach. So.
Thanks, Bevo. Hope so.
And obviously this year, the locals are not too happy about the Tokyo Olympics going ahead. I think I heard the other day 80% of the locals don't want it to happen. There's talk about having small crowds or having no crowds whatsoever. How have you dealt with it, knowing that the crowd's such a big part of the Olympic Games, and, when you're competing with your diving and the crowd being so influential to you, how would have you gone without the crowd?
To be honest, I think it's going to be a really weird Olympics that there's probably not going to be any crowd, which is a good thing because it's safety of our athletes as well. I wouldn't want a crowd if I had a choice in in these circumstances. Marching out, the crowd was wild. It's really loud. You can hear people supporting you. I'd have no idea where my mum and dad and sister were in the crowd, but I knew they were. But at the end of the day, I think we have competitions, on a state level, which are obviously really small compared to Olympics, but that are not heaps people present. And I think you just kind of get used to that as well. So I think regardless of crowd, no crowd, I think you just go in and you just know what you got to do. I don't thrive on the crowd too much. You can hear them, but I'm still in my own zone. So I'm hoping that's what the other athlete's going to be doing.
And life after diving, a couple of years ago, you're involved with the Fringe, Rach. Are you still involved with the acrobatic sort of side of things, or what's life going forwards for you?
Not so much. I've just taken a break from aerial silks. I did do Fringe a couple of years ago. It was awesome, really fun to perform as opposed to compete. But training's a little bit full on at the moment. My fiance's got a broken leg, and I'm just kind of looking after him and doing all that. Work's pretty busy, which I love. So that's kind of just taken a step backwards because I just can't train that late at the minute. But, moving forward, I think I'm just one step at a time. I'm a pretty big planner. I am getting married at the end of the year. So that's
congratulations.
Thank you. That's taking up a lot of time, but also I'm a bit OCD. So I like everything very organised and planned and prepared so that, hopefully the lead up, a month in, is going to be as less stressful as it can be. But other than that, moving forward in life, still enjoying my job, don't have any plans to go anywhere from there, and just trying not to book so much stuff in so I'm not busy every weekend and chilling out with my family. So
this is a random question. I didn't tell you about. I was going to ask you this one before, but we see a lot of gymnasts and divers on Australian Ninja Warrior now. I happen to love the show, one of my favourite shows. Would you ever compete on that?
No. So I train with Celeste Dixon at Aerial Silks, and love that she's in it. And I, to be honest, don't watch a lot of television, but when she's on, I watch Ninja Warrior. So I do love that show. It doesn't interest me mainly because the competitive factor anymore. I did my competitive sport. I just don't have that drive in me the same way that I do. I probably do, and I don't want to train that hard anymore. I don't want to train 6 or 7 days a week. I want to, I'd rather do a sport for fitness and enjoyment and socializing usually right now, as opposed to, you know, I see how hard Celeste trains to be where she is on that show, which is awesome. And I'm good on her. I'm very proud of her, but it's not something I don't think I could do. So.
Yes, we wish Celeste all the very best. She's a lovely girl. And of course, Nathan as well. He's a good fella. So yeah, there's a few Southlys involved in that one. So yeah, well, Rachel Bugg, thanks so much for joining us today on Legends of Bevo, the Road to Tokyo. It's been a real pleasure. We've chatted before in the past, and it's always good fun getting you on.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Happy to come back anytime. Thanks, Bevo.
Thanks so much.